Imagine a time when there were no churches with signs, no crosses around necks, no social media bios that said Christian, just men and women walking dusty roads, facing storms and persecution, but carrying something deep within them. A fire, a light, a truth. They didn't have denominations, they didn't wear labels. They had a way of life. And that life was so radical, so pure, so different. The world had to call them something, so in the city of Antioch, a name was born, Christian. But hold on now. Don't just skip ahead. Because this isn't just about history. This is about identity. This is about you. What does that name mean today? What did it mean then? And how did a word that was once a whisper in the Roman Empire turn into a title spoken around the world? You see, in a world where names are just thrown around, where words lose their weight, we've got to slow down and ask, what does it truly mean to be called a Christian? Is it just belief? Is it tradition? Or is it a calling, a way of living that echoes the footsteps of a man who healed the broken, loved the forgotten, forgave the enemy, and died for the world? This isn't just a word, it's a legacy. And today we're going to dive into it, not with judgment, not with pride, but with honesty, curiosity, and reverence. So sit tight. Whether you were born in the church or just asking questions, whether you wear the name or wonder what it's all about, this message is for you. Because by the end of this, you won't just know where the word Christian came from, you'll feel the weight of it, the power of it, and maybe, just maybe, you'll rediscover what it was always meant to be. Let's talk, let's learn, let's walk this path together. Now let's go back, way back, to a time when there was no Facebook to post your faith, no YouTube to stream your sermon, no church buildings filled with sound systems and projectors. All they had was faith. Real, raw, unfiltered faith. The kind that could get you in prison, thrown to lions, or hung on a cross. But even in the face of persecution, these people didn't back down. They didn't hide, they loved harder, gave more, spoke boldly. And that, my friends, is where it all begins. The book of Acts, chapter 11, verse 26. It says that the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. Now let that sink in. They didn't give themselves that name. No, sir. It was the people, outsiders, who saw how these followers of Jesus lived. They saw something different, not just in how they worshiped, but in how they walked, how they talked, how they forgave, how they loved their enemies, how they lifted up the poor, how they prayed for the sick, how they gave everything they had for the sake of others. And they said, these people, they must be of Christ. But don't mistake it. That word wasn't a compliment in those days. It was a mockery, a label meant to ridicule. Little Christs, they said. But the early believers wore it like a badge of honor. They didn't run from the name, they lived it. You see, being a Christian wasn't about convenience. It wasn't a box you checked. It wasn't about politics or culture. It was about Christ. Living like Him, serving like Him, loving like Him, no matter the cost. And when the world looked on, they couldn't ignore it. So before you wear that name, before you post it, shout it, or preach it, ask yourself, do I look like Christ? Do I live like Christ? Because that's what the name means. And that's where it came from the fire, the sacrifice, the passion of those early disciples who refused to blend in, who refused to bow down because they had been transformed. And my brother, my sister, that's what the name still calls us to today. Now let's lean in for a moment. Because this ain't just about a name. It's about identity. You see, when the people of Antioch looked at those early followers of Jesus, they didn't just see men and women walking around quoting scriptures. They saw a reflection of Jesus Himself, His compassion, His power, His humility, His truth. And that, my friend, is what shook them to their core. The word Christian is not just a label, it's a testimony. It's not about membership in a religious group, it's about being marked by a life that radiates something divine, the kind of love that's not normal, The kind of forgiveness that makes people stop and say, how is that even possible? The kind of courage that faces death with peace and lives with purpose. That's what those early believers carried, and that's why the name Christian was born. Now hear me on this. Those followers didn't go around begging for titles. They didn't chase status or popularity. They weren't building empires. They were building bridges between heaven and earth. They were healing the broken, feeding the hungry, lifting the oppressed, and living lives so radically different, so full of light and love that even their enemies had to admit, these people are different. And let me tell you something, when your life starts to mirror the light of the one you follow, people will notice. Oh yes, they might mock you, label you, even try to bring you down. But the power is in your walk, not your talk. Because real faith isn't just heard, it's seen. That's what made the name Christian powerful. Not just that they followed Christ, but that Christ could be seen in them, in their actions, in their choices, in their hearts. They weren't perfect, but they were authentic. And authenticity always speaks louder than appearance. So when you carry that name today, remember, it's more than tradition. It's a calling, a responsibility. You wear the name of the King, the Healer, the Savior. So don't take it lightly. Don't wear it on Sunday and forget it on Monday. Let it define you, because in the end, the greatest testimony of Christ is not a sermon, it's a life lived in His image. That's the legacy of the name. That's the weight it carries. And my friend, that's the challenge. If you say you are a Christian, let the world see Christ in you. Now let's go a little deeper. The moment we understand where the word Christian came from, we also need to ask, what did it cost to be called that? You see, in the early days of the faith, being labeled a Christian wasn't something to brag about. It wasn't some badge of honor, it wasn't printed on a church sign, and it sure wasn't followed by likes and shares. No, sir. It was dangerous, it was costly. In fact, being called a Christian could get you killed. In Antioch, where the name was first used, the Roman Empire wasn't playing. To claim Jesus as your Lord, that was to defy Caesar. That was rebellion, that was treason. These men and women weren't just stepping into a religion, they were stepping into the fire. They risked their homes, their families, their lives, all because they believed in something greater. All because they knew truth is worth dying for. So understand this, the name Christian was forged in suffering. It was tested in the arena. It was sanctified in blood. When the lions roared, when the swords were drawn, when the crowds mocked and spit and hated, those early believers stood tall. And you know why? Because they weren't living for this world. They had their eyes on eternity. Too often today, we want the name without the sacrifice. We want the blessing without the burden. But let me tell you something powerful, something real. If your faith costs you nothing, it might be worth nothing. Real faith requires surrender. Real identity comes through fire. And that's the fire those early Christians walked through. They were willing to lose everything because they knew they had already gained the most important thing, the love and approval of God. That's what gave them strength. That's what gave them peace. And that, my friend, is what made them unstoppable. So if you carry the name Christian today, know its origin, know its weight. It is not just a label, it's a legacy. And it was built by those who loved Jesus more than life itself. Now the question is, will you live a life worthy of that name? Now I want you to lean in for this one, because this right here, this is where the whole thing shifts. We've talked about the word Christian, but let's talk about the heart behind it. Because you see, the power of a name is not in how it sounds, it's in how it's lived. The early followers of Jesus didn't call themselves Christians. No, sir. They called themselves disciples, followers of the way. That's what they were known as. Why? Because their life wasn't about religion. It was about relationship. It was about a walk, a journey, a surrender, a way of life that said, I don't just believe in Jesus, I follow him wherever he leads. Now listen to this. When the people of Antioch looked at those early believers, they said, these people, they act like Christ. That's what Christian meant. Not someone who goes to a temple or reads scripture or speaks holy words. No, it meant little Christ. That's what they saw, a reflection of him, a mirror of his mercy, his love, his truth, his fire. But here's the catch, and this is the part that hits deep. They didn't mean it as a compliment. It was a mockery. Look at these people, they said. They're just like that Jesus man who got crucified. But the believers didn't flinch. They didn't correct it. They embraced it. Why? Because there was honor in being like Jesus. Even when it meant being ridiculed, even when it meant suffering, that's what made them powerful. That's what made them unshakable. Their identity didn't come from society. It came from heaven. And they lived it out in every step, every breath, every act of compassion, every stand for truth. So when you say you're a Christian today, don't say it lightly. Say it boldly, but say it with humility. Because it means you're saying, I will live like him, I will love like him, I will forgive like him, I will carry my cross even when the world laughs, even when it costs me everything. Because in the end, being a Christian isn't about wearing the name, it's about honoring the name. And my friend, that kind of life, that kind of faith, that's what changes the world. Now we get into the deeper layer. Let's peel this onion back just a little more, because sometimes what we think we know about a word is just the surface. Christian was not created in a place of praise. It was born in a moment of misunderstanding. And yet, it became a mission. You see, the city of Antioch was a crossroads, a melting pot of cultures, languages, philosophies. And in this diverse, noisy, complicated city, a group of men and women were doing something different. They weren't arguing about gods. They weren't fighting for power. They were loving, feeding the poor, praying together, healing the sick, welcoming the rejected, and forgiving. Oh, yes, even those who hurt them. People didn't know what to do with that. They hadn't seen that kind of radical love before. So what did they do? They gave them a label. They called them Christians, but let's not sugarcoat it. That label was a way of setting them apart. It was society's way of saying, you're not one of us, you belong to him. But let me tell you something powerful. The early believers didn't fight the label. They owned it. Because when the world tried to name them with sarcasm, they answered with faith. When people called them little Christs, they didn't back down. They stepped up. They said, if being like Christ is what you see in me, then so be it. And that's the power I want you to feel right now. That's the fire I want you to carry out of this video. Being a Christian, it was never meant to be comfortable. It was never about popularity or public image or social status. It was about being marked by love, driven by purpose, anchored in truth. Even when it cost everything. They didn't wear crosses around their necks to be fashionable. They carried the real cross on their backs, in their hearts, in their homes. Their faith wasn't part of their life, it was their life. Every decision, every sacrifice, every act of mercy. And here's the message for you. If the world were to watch you for one day, would they see Christ? Would they sense something different in your walk, your words, your way of life? Or would they struggle to tell you apart from the crowd? Because the label Christian isn't just a name, it's a calling to live, to lead, to love like the one who changed everything. So my friend, don't just carry the title, carry the testimony. Be the light in the darkness, be the hand that lifts the fallen, be the voice that speaks truth when it's inconvenient. Be the soul that chooses faith when the world chooses fear. Because in Antioch, they didn't name themselves Christians. They earned that name. And now the question remains, will you? Now listen to me. This is where it all comes full circle. Because when we talk about the word Christian, we're not just talking about a name. We're talking about an identity, a transformation, a spiritual rebirth. The early followers of Christ weren't given that name because they applied for it. No one handed it to them with applause and admiration. That name came because they looked like him, walked like him, loved like him. Let's pause right there. Loved like him. not debated like him, not posted like him, not judged like him. No, they loved like him. That's why the people in Antioch had to call them something, because these people were different. They broke bread with the poor, they forgave their enemies, they lived in community, and they had a peace that could not be stolen. You think about today and you ask yourself, are we living up to that name? Are we embodying what they saw? Because the tragedy of the modern age is that the word Christian has become common, cultural, convenient. In some places, it's nothing more than a checkbox on a form. But in Antioch, it was a cost. It meant you might be mocked, rejected, even killed. Yet they embraced it. Why? Because they understood something we need to reclaim today, that being a Christian isn't about what you say, it's about how you live. You can know the scriptures, quote the verses, sing the songs, but if you ain't showing love, you ain't showing Jesus. Let me say that again. If you're not showing love, you're not showing Jesus. The name Christian is not just a badge, it's a mirror. It reflects who we follow. When people hear that name, they should see him, not politics, not pride, not perfection. Him, his humility, his mercy, his courage, his willingness to walk into the dark places and say, you are still loved. And you know what? That message is needed now more than ever, because this world is noisy, angry, divided. People are searching for truth, for hope, for a reason to keep going. And the word Christian, when lived out with authenticity, it still speaks louder than hate, louder than fear, louder than division. So I challenge you, if you're going to call yourself a Christian, wear that name with honor. Let it mean something. Let it cost you something. Let it stretch you beyond comfort. Because the one we follow didn't take the easy road, he took the cross. And if you really want to follow him, if you really want to carry that name with power and purpose, then step into the light. Be bold, be faithful, be loving in a world that forgot how. That's how the world will know you're his. Because long before we ever wrote it down, long before we ever preached it in churches, the first Christians lived it, and the world couldn't ignore it. Now it's your turn. Now, family, let me leave you with this. The word Christian, it ain't just something we wear on Sunday mornings. It's not just a name we toss around to prove we're holy. No, sir. No, ma'am. It's a calling. It's a lifestyle, and it's a legacy. The early believers didn't carry that name because it made life easier. They carried it because they were changed. Something happened inside of them. They met Jesus, not just in the flesh, but in the spirit. And that encounter flipped their world upside down. You see, when they called them Christians in Antioch, it wasn't a compliment, it was a label to mock them, to isolate them. But those followers, they didn't run from it. They stood tall. They took that name and they redeemed it. They said, yes, we are followers of Christ, and we won't be silent about it. And today, that's the question hanging in the air. Are we still carrying that name the way they did? Do people look at our lives and see Christ in us? Not in the way we preach, not in how many verses we know, but in how we love, in how we forgive, in how we serve those who don't look like us, don't talk like us. Because if the name of Jesus is on your lips, then his heart should be in your hands. His mercy should be in your actions. His truth should be in your walk. So stand strong, my friend. Let the name Christian mean something deep. Let it echo through your life. Let it shape your decisions. Let it be the reason someone else finds hope in a dark world. Because the world isn't changed by Christians in name only. It's changed by Christians who carry Christ inside of them and live like it. Every single day